Welcome to the Sage 100 Custom Office and Scripting presentation. My name is Ken Knight. I am a Senior Solutions Consultant for Vracus Blum Computer Consulting. I have been working with Sage 100 now for almost 26 years and have been working with the scripting aspect of the software since about 2008. So have a little bit of experience with it and hopefully can provide you with some insight into how this tool could work for you. So, our agenda for today is I want to try and provide you with enough info for you to understand scripting, but try not to overwhelm you with technical terms. This isn't going to be easy. When you're talking about scripting, it is inherently technical, but I'm going to do my best to at least let you leave here with an idea of what could be done with scripting. So if you are facing a challenge in how the Sage 100 system is operating for you, I can at least provide you with an idea that perhaps scripting could help, and you could contact us and we could see if it could meet your need. I'm going to talk about the background and concepts behind Sage 100 scripting. I'm going to give you some scripting examples, real world ones that I have done for clients. And I'm going to provide you with some scripting resources if you decide that you want to take this on yourself. So let's talk a little bit about scripting background and concepts. All of this really is housed within Custom Office. So many of you are familiar with Custom Office because either you or we for you have provided some user-defined fields that you required in your system to capture data that the system doesn't do out of the box. Custom Office also offers you the ability to put in user-defined tables to contain data that, again, the system would not normally contain out of the box. We can make screen changes utilizing Customizer. That's where we put those user-defined fields onto the data entry screens for you to utilize. And lastly, we can do user-defined scripts. Now, user-defined scripts utilize what Sage calls their business framework. You will sometimes hear this referred to as the Business Object Interface, or BOI. This is only possible because Sage has, since 2004, been moving all of Sage 100 into a concept known as a three-tier architecture. So what is a three-tier architecture? That means that the software literally has three different levels. At its base, it has the database that contains the data. In the middle, you have the business object, and the business object is what contains all of the logic behind how the system functions. And then at the top, you have the user interface. Okay, so those are the three different levels: the database, the business object that has all of the functional logic and how the system works, and then the user interface. As I mentioned, Sage began this move to this architecture in April of 2004 with the release of MAS 9200 version 4.0. And for those of you who don't realize it, Sage 100 is simply a newer name for a product that years ago was initially called MAS 90. Then it got MAS 200 tagged on for the client server version, etc. But with MAS 9200 version 4.0, they released the library master and the general ledger in this new three-tier architecture or business object model. They then released it in phases. With the release of 4.1, they released accounts receivable, sales order, and inventory in this new three-tier architecture. With 4.2, they released accounts payable and purchase order in this new architecture, on and on and on. The only modules not in this architecture at this point in time are work order, MRP, and parts of operations management. Now, work order and MRP are being phased out. They are being replaced by production management and IRP, which are written in this new three-tier architecture with a business object model approach. So I will be discussing scripting done within the Sage 100 user interface. But I want to take a moment to talk about doing scripting outside of the Sage 100 user interface. Now, the reason that we're going to concentrate, and I'll back up a half a step, the reason we want to concentrate on doing it inside the user interface is because it's easier than doing it from outside the user interface. You get some stuff for free, connections to different objects, certain objects themselves, like the user interface is an object, and I'll be talking about that in a moment. So doing scripting inside the user interface is different and easier than doing it from outside the user interface. However, I have had clients contact me. I had a client that was a software development company, and they said, hey, our developers want to create their own link to our website shopping cart. And I'm like, okay, you can do that. But what they didn't do, and what I want to make sure you walk away with from today's session, is that the business object interface is Sage 100's externally facing application programming interface, or API, and it comes free with the system. So if you ever have or you engage with a developer and they say, hey, we want to use Sage 100's API, it is this business object interface programming. The reason that I want to point that out is with that client, the software developing firm, as well as another client, their developers used what a veterinarian my wife and I are friends with calls Dr. Google. So they had an issue, they wanted to solve it, they went out to Google and they looked it up. One of them found a product called SData to connect to Sage 100 and actually started writing in SData. The other one found something called eBusiness Web Services. And they gave me a call saying, hey, we're trying to install eBusiness Web Services. It wants an unlocking key. What do we do? Don't use SData or eBusiness Web Services. That's what you do. Neither of those are the actual API for connecting to Sage 100 from outside the program. And they both have issues. SData is 100% deprecated with the 2025 release of Sage 100 that's due out in April or May of next year. And when I say 100% deprecated, it does not come with the software. It's not there. So if you were using it to write an interface, it's not going to work, and there's no way you can make it work. It doesn't exist. Additionally, Sage stopped selling eBusiness Web Services in May of 2023. I would anticipate that at some point they will fully deprecate that as well, and it simply will not be available or supported at all. Now, if you happen to be running Sage 100 Premium and you have a SQL database then as your back end, I would suggest that 99.99% of the time you do not want to write directly to the SQL database. The advantage to utilizing business objects is those business objects hold all of the logic for the system. If you push values directly into the SQL database, you would bypass that. And by bypassing it, you could potentially push a sales order into the system with a customer number that does not exist, or with an item code that does not exist. Now you have corrupted your database because it holds values that don't exist in other related tables. That's why you don't ever really want to write directly to the database with any ERP product. You want to go through something that provides you with the business logic. Now, if you engage a development firm and they want to connect to Sage 100 from outside the user interface, they can utilize any programming language. You can even do this inside the user interface that supports COM, which is component object modeling, or an object-oriented programming approach like C#, VB.NET, VBScript, Python, etc. Any of those languages will work. We mostly use VBScript inside the user interface. So, with all that being said, let's start talking about programming within the user interface. And when we're talking about business objects, well, what kinds of objects are available for scripting? Well, there are primarily 5 different objects. There is the business object itself, which has a suffix assigned to it of _BUS. This is the thing that contains all of the logic. Through the business object, you can read, write, delete. It enforces all of the business rules when writing to the table, so you can't push a sales order in with a customer number that doesn't exist or an item code that doesn't exist. Okay. A naming example is like AP_vendor_bus. There is a service object that ends with _SVC. This gives you read-only access to the tables. You can't write to them, you can't delete from them, but it's faster. So oftentimes, if I'm in a script just searching for a value, I will utilize the service object because it is the fastest way to just get data. There is an _RPT object for reports and forms, an _UPD, and an _UI for user interface. I will primarily utilize the business, the service, and the user interface objects. The user interface can be handy if you need to know what data entry screen you're in. Is it sales order entry or sales order invoice data entry? That can be very beneficial. I have very, very seldom, if ever, used the RPT or UPD business objects. Okay, so those are the different types of objects are available. So what kind of connections can we get to these objects? What kind of connections are available for scripting? And these are also known as handles. Well, you can get a connection to the current business object. So if I'm doing a script that fires off the sales order detail, I have an OBIS_OBJ or current business object that is connected to the SO_sales order detail _bus. So scripting through the user interface, it's always looking at where are you trying to get this script to fire. So if I'm doing something on the sales order lines, my current business object is sales order detail. As I had mentioned earlier, when you're scripting through the user interface, you get some things for free. Well, one of the things that you get for free is if your current business object is a detail object like the sales order detail, you get a connection automatically to the associated header object. So you have your OHeader_OBJ. In this case, if I'm on the sales order detail, this gets me to just the sales order, to the header of the sales order. There's a handle to the script. It's a script helper object called OScript. There's a connection to the session. Again, another thing that you get, quote unquote, for free when you program through the user interface. Through the session, the system knows who's the user logged into Sage. What company are they in? What's the module date that they have set? Things like that that are all session related to their current session in Sage 100. As we had talked about, we have a connection to the data entry screen, the OUI. So we know what user interface, what data entry screen we're in. Is it sales order entry? Is it sales order invoice data entry? Is it customer maintenance? We know it's available to the script through this connection of OUI_OBJ. Now, there are 2 column events, and I'm going to talk about events here in a couple slides. But for the 2 column events, we also have handles to or connections to the column itself and the value that's contained in it. Okay, so we've talked about what types of objects are available. We've talked about the ways that we can connect to them. So what kind of commands can we issue? What kind of methods, as they are called, are available to scripting? There's many, many ones, but common ones are things like get value. So in this example, I'm saying, okay, let's get a value from my header object. The inverse of that is set value. And here what I'm doing is I'm setting a value on the current business object. So let's talk about the example that I just had, where my current business object is the sales order detail, which means that my header object is the sales order header. I had a client that had very specific reporting needs that required me to put the customer PO number from the sales order header into a user-defined field that we had on the sales order lines. That way they could just connect up in their report to sales order detail and see on each line what was a customer PO number. Utilizing these two commands formatted just like this, I was able to write a script connected to the header object, got the value of the customer PO number, and then set the value into that user-defined field on the sales order lines or in the sales order detail. So get value and set value are two that are used very, very often. Utilizing the O script connection, you can do a set error or error message. What this will do is when someone, and this is usually done on a pre-validate, when someone goes ahead and puts a value in, the script would fire. If that value in some way, shape, or form is incorrect, and I will show you this in an example, it will pop an error message and take them right back to that field. You can set UI controls. You can actually enable or disable tabs or fields or buttons. And I'll show you that in a script example as well. You can pop message boxes. That's as part of a session. These can be simple OK with an OK button. They can have a yes, no, and depending on whether they answer yes or no, different things happen. You can get the screen name. Again, this is through the user interface object. The system knows what screen you're in, whether it is sales order entry or sales order invoice data entry. I utilized this recently for a client who they wanted a scriptifier when the sales order was updated. But the problem was when you enter an invoice, it also updates the sales order, and the script was firing at that time as well. So I added a statement where I used the OUI object, get screen name, and told the script to only fire if the screen name was SO entry. And that's it. It was great. The script worked fine. When they were in invoice data entry, the script didn't fire because that wasn't the right screen name. So now we talked about the objects that we can connect to, the connections that we can establish, the commands that we can give through those connections. The last piece to the puzzle then is events. This is basically saying what triggers the script to run. When does it run? Now, there are events that are available at the table level, at the column level, and at the user interface level. At the table level, we have multiple different ones. I seldom use script initialization or set default values, but often use pre-write. So the script is going to fire right before that record is written to the table. Post-write, it fires right after it's written. Pre-delete, post-delete, post-read. So we go into sales order entry and we pull up a sales order. It just read a record a script could fire. At the column level, we have our pre-validate and post-validate. Like I said, generally with a set error, you're going to use a pre-validate on a field, and I'll show you that. And for user interface, you have post, load, and on exit. So you could literally say, when I simply click on sales order entry and the screen loads, I can fire a script. Or I can do it on exit. When we leave the sales order entry screen or when we leave the lines tab, we can have a script fire. So these are the events or triggers. So those are kind of the four pieces for doing the scripting. We have our business objects that we connect to. We have our ways of connecting to them. We have the commands that we can give when we're connected to that business object. And then we have our triggers that determine when the script actually fires. Now, I will say too, there is another trigger that can be done. You can add a button to a screen utilizing Customizer, and you can have a script fire when that button is pressed. So that is also another way to trigger a script to fire. So let's go through some scripting examples. But before I do that, I want to mention many times I'll have people say, oh my gosh, I've got a script, but it just plain doesn't work. No matter what I do, it won't work. Well, in company maintenance, there's a checkbox called Allow External Access. If this box is not checked, your script won't fire no matter what you do, because those scripts are firing outside of the business object. If this box isn't checked, scripts don't work. And I'll show you that here in a moment. Now, I'm going to go through 3 different scripts. The first thing I'm going to do is explain the use case. I'm then going to show you what the script does through the user interface, and then we'll look at the script itself. Okay. The 3 examples I'm going to do are called private vendor, order type, and holiday and weekend ship date. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Library Master, Company Maintenance to show you that checkbox. And that is on the Preferences tab right here, Allow External Access. So if that box is not checked, scripts won't fire. So script example number 1, which is private vendor. So this came from a client of mine, and they're like, look, we have all of our employees, including the owner of the company, set up as vendors so that when they submit expenses, we can cut checks. But we don't want our purchasing people to be able to drill into anything related to those vendors. They don't need to see the expenses that were submitted by the owner of the company. What can we do with that? So in combination with setting up some role maintenance to lock things down fairly tightly, the other thing that I did was I put a box in vendor maintenance on the additional tab for a private vendor. And in this example, you will see that I have Joe Owner. Joe Owner has that box checked. I'm now going to change my user to my demo user because if I could type, I could change it. You'll notice the demo user has very little access to much in the system. If I go to vendor maintenance and I just use whether I use a lookup, type in a vendor number, utilize the buttons here to move backwards and forwards. Okay, this is O1 Airway. You'll notice I have access to everything. If I just keep arrowing, or let me go ahead and select because I'll get those pop-ups from the memos. If I choose Joe Owner, now all of a sudden, none of my tabs are enabled. Okay, if I arrow off of Joe Owner, I can get to everything. And here's the cool thing. If I'm on the Invoices tab of this vendor and I arrow back to Joe Owner, I'm automatically kicked back to the main tab and all of the other ones are disabled. I've actually implemented this for quite a few clients. So let's take a look at exactly how that's done. So I'm going to come into my user-defined field and table maintenance. Going to go to my AP vendor master and go to user-defined scripts. So here is our user-defined script. It is based on a table post read. So it is based on someone going into the vendor master and picking a record. After that record has been picked, This is the script that fires. So we always have to define our variables. Here I'm just zeroing out my return value, and then I have a variable called temp private. And what the script is doing, it is going through the business object, the vendor, and getting the value for UDF private, my user defined field, and setting it into this variable, temp private. I'm then doing a test to see what role the person who's logged into the system has. If they are a member of management, purchasing, or user, and my temp private equals yes, then I am using my OScript set UI control to disable all of the various tabs, which are folders technically to the system. And I'm invoking the button of going to my main. That's why it flipped me back to the main folder. Otherwise, set the UI control to be enabled and then end out of my if statement. So it's essentially an if, then, else, and end the if. It's very straightforward and it works very well. The test for role membership, that's why I logged in as myself. I could see stuff, but logged in as the demo user who is a member of the purchasing role, that person could not see anything on Joe owner when that private vendor checkbox is checked. The second example was a client of mine who felt that their users did not have enough visibility of whether or not an order was a quote or a standard order. They wanted to be even more obvious than it might be otherwise. So what I did for them was I added a user-defined field, which you're not going to see yet because it does not have a border on it. And now it appears. If the order type is a standard order, at the very top of the screen, they get a green field that says order. If they choose quote, it turns red and it says quote. This was the in your face, this is what this is, quote, or order approach. That was the script that they asked for. Now, why they couldn't just look at the order type, I don't know, but hey, that's what the customer asked for. The other thing that I'm going to show you, this is actually really cool, and I've done this for a couple different clients, is they wanted to make sure that, let me flip this to a standard order, a ship date did not fall on either a Saturday or a Sunday or a holiday. So the Saturday and Sunday is pretty obvious, but what about the holidays? What I did for them is I provided for them in Custom Office a user-defined table that was the list of holidays. So they could plug in what was Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, whatever they wanted it to be, and build their list of holidays where their business was closed and they were not shipping. How that manifests itself in sales order entry is if I come in here and I choose, let's say, Sunday the 30th, it says, well, Saturday the 30th, 11/30/2024 is a Saturday. The ship date cannot be a weekend day. Please enter a new ship date. Okay. If I go ahead and I choose the 28th, 11/28/2024 is Thanksgiving. The ship date cannot be a holiday. Please enter a new ship date. So that is how that script works. That's my weekend or holiday ship date script. So what do these actually look like? Well, let's come back into our user-defined field and table maintenance. Let's go into our sales order header. and look at user-defined scripts. So the first one is that order type. This is working on a column post validate of the order type. So when they choose this is an order or this is a quote, it's after they've made that selection. We zero out our return value. Here's our variable order type. We're just defining it as a string. And what we're doing is we are getting the value of order type. So oBusinessObj get value order type and put it in our variable of order T. If order T equals P, okay, and they utilize CRM, so we had prospect quotes, then what it was going to do is it was going to set a control property through the UI object and change the background color and set a value in that user-defined field of quote. You see the same thing here if it was a plain old quote, if you're not using CRM. Okay, we're connecting to the UI object with a script connection. And then with that UI object, we're setting a property control, which is the background color. Then we are putting the value in there of quote. If it's a standard order, we're doing the same thing, only we're using light green. And we're plugging in the word order, exactly what you saw. Now you'll notice that our background color can actually be RGB, red, green, blue, and you can assign the values to make it whatever color you want. There are also a handful of predefined colors such as light green, green, red, light red, etc., where you can just utilize those literal values. I didn't like any of the reds, so I did my own RGB color. And there's various color generators that you can find out on the internet. There's even one in Custom Office, actually, within the system for setting like company background colors that will give you this information as well. So that's how that script works. As far as our ship expire dates, okay, this one is looking at the holidays. It is a column pre-validate. Again, I'm using a set error command in here, so the pre-validate works for those. Again, zeroing out my return value, setting my ship date variable, a formatted ship date variable because I actually have to format it within this script, creating an object called holiday, and then another variable called holiday name. So we are return value is oBizObj get value of the ship expire date and set it in ship date. If it's not blank, then format it. So ship date should be formatted into fship date with this specific format. Oh, holiday, I'm getting an object through my custom office user-defined table service. Okay, one of those connections, a service connection. And I want to connect to the table called SOUDT holidays. Okay, if I successfully get a connection, then set OHoliday as an object called OHoliday. And then what I'm doing is I'm moving through the records. I'm finding my formatted ship date. If I actually find it, my retval equals 1, then I'm getting my description of holiday name. If my holiday name isn't blank, then set the error and say, hey, this ship date is Christmas, Thanksgiving, day after Thanksgiving. Ship date cannot be a holiday. Please enter a new ship date. And it takes me right back to that field to change the ship date. It's the same sort of approach with our weekend check. With our weekend check, it's a little bit simpler. Okay, we're doing the same thing where we get our ship expire date. If it's not blank, then we format it. There is a day of week command available in VBScript where Sunday is day of week 1 and Saturday is day of week 7. So if day of week 1 equals 1, then I want my day name to be Sunday. If day of week 7 equals 7, then I want to be Saturday. And I'm saying if day of week 1 equals 1 or it equals 7, then do my same set error. This ship date is a day name, Saturday, Sunday. The ship date cannot be a weekend day. Please enter a new ship date. It's a set error. It takes me right back to the ship date field, and I've got to key in a new ship date. So those are examples of scripts that I have done for several clients. Real world examples of where we can utilize user-defined scripting to change the behavior of Sage 100 to fit their specific needs. So let's talk about some resources. And I'm going to go through these and I'll show them to you, very similar to the scripts. First and foremost, I would say is contact us. Myself or Justin Teague, one of my coworkers. Justin and I are the two Sage 100 scripting people at Brackus Blum. If you have any question and you think that, oh my gosh, this looks like a good opportunity for scripting, contact one of us and we'll be able to discuss your situation with you and see if we can actually do it with a script. Another thing that's available is the resources within Sage 100. There is the Sage Community Hub, the Sage Knowledge Base, Sage University, the ubiquitous Dr. Google. Yes, you can look things up. I will have to admit that it's helped me with some of my syntax and the scripts that I've done. And one of the newer ones that I've heard about that I have not personally done is to utilize ChatGPT. It has been suggested that utilizing artificial intelligence or something like a ChatGPT, it can actually correct the syntax in a script for you. Again, I haven't tried it. I have used other tools out there that will take like a VB script and convert it to Java for different purposes. But that's a very interesting one that I am intrigued to try. First and foremost is within Sage, okay, there is this resources tab that's available to you. It's under web content. There's information center, resources, and feature tours. When you scroll down, you can get program information. And if you click this link for file layouts and program info, it will take you to this screen. Now, a few things related to this. One is with file layouts, which is also incredibly helpful for Crystal report writing. Let's say that I go into accounts payable and I'm going to scroll down to my AP vendor master. Where are we at? I just want AP vendor. There we go. What this will show you are all of the fields that are contained in AP vendor. It will also show you related business objects. This is coming right out of the AP vendor bus. So the first thing we have is our AP division number. It is 2 characters long. That's the length. The TUR is, what type is it? Is it a string or is it numeric? Is it uppercase? And is it required? So this is a 2-character string that is not uppercase but is required. Our vendor number is a 7-character string that is uppercase and is also required, etc., etc. So you have an idea of the fields that are available to you. But you will also have some information about the business objects that are out there, because sometimes you are writing a script, you're not 100% sure what the business object is that you're connecting to. So using AP as an example again, you scroll down to the bottom, you will see here that they reference 3 of the business objects that we talked about. The AP vendor underscore bus, the associated read-only service object, and this is the UI. That's actually the user interface object for data entry into the vendor master. If you click on any one of these, you get quite a bit of information. Most of this is not going to be of great benefit to you, but this will at least identify what the syntax is for, say I want to connect a vendor remit to. Is it vendor remit to, or is it just vendor remit? Well, it's just vendor remit. Okay. One of the other resources that I mentioned in my list was the Sage Community Hub. Well, if you go to the Sage Community Hub, you will find that there is a business object interface forum. And you have the ability to post, if you are a member, to look at postings that other people have put in, errors that other people have run into, etc. This is a great way to learn about the business object interface and how to do programming within it. Another thing that's available is the Sage knowledge base. So if I come into my Sage 100 knowledge base and I learn how to type, if I type in business object, I'm going to get things like, what are some business object interface resources available for Sage 100? Okay, so here they're going to talk about things like Sage University. They're going to talk about the Sage forums, etc. Okay, some of the other things that you would have available in here. So one of the other things that I can look up here on the knowledge base are examples of, say, my customizer script variables. And this is where we start getting into a lot of what I showed in my PowerPoint presentation. Here is my business object handle. Here are some useful methods, my get value, my set value, the write command, edit state, which can come into handy as well because it tells you if this is a new record or you're editing an existing record, things such as that. Here's my session. I can get the company code, the company name, the user code. Some of the script helper things. Here's my set error. Here's my invoke button. So this is available through the knowledge base. One of the other things I mentioned was Sage University. They actually have a class on using the Sage 100 object interface. Now, depending on what your maintenance level is, whether you are silver or gold, this, or if you're not current, but at most, this would cost you $99. Okay, for me, it's free. We are a partner, but $99 is a very, very inexpensive investment because this actually has multiple videos. It has downloads that can be brought down, actual documentation and scripting examples. It's a very worthwhile class to take to get familiar with how all of this works. So these are the resources. Contact myself or Justin if you have any questions. Look at Sage 100 resources, the link from within the software itself, the community hub, the knowledge base, Sage University. Yeah, you can look some things up. And I'm looking forward to trying this Chat GPT to see what it can do to help make scripting a little easier. So thank you for attending today's session. For more information, please feel free to contact me. Again, my name is Ken Knight, and my email is knight@v-bcc.com. Thank you very much.